Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast split over part 1 and part 2. So for your listening pleasure this week and next week, because there's so much in this conversation.
Oh, it's gold, like so many nuggets.
Oh my goodness. Recession proofing your family financially and emotionally with Coco, the astro-economist. And she is going to blow your mind. So we really hope that you enjoy her and all of her lived wisdom, and that you find pieces of yourself in her story that soothe your nervous system and inspire your heart to build the life and the wealth that you're seeking. So we're just going to quickly read out her bio so that you have a grounding before we jump into the interview with Coco. So Coco is a Tahitian-born, French-speaking, straight-talking Aussie who's lived many lives, from corporate career and self-made property millionaire in her 20s to taking over her family's commercial cleaning business and learning how to come back from losing it all in her 30s. Business is her bread and butter, but what is her lifeblood? It's seeing the incredible women grow in their business journey and overcome their old stories and paradigms. So if you're looking for a place to bring the work to the woo and make the inner work the everyday, then she says, grab yourself a carton of chocolate coconut water and let's get to know each other. And it delights me, her bio, because it's exactly how she is, right?
Yeah. I mean, what I just love about Coco is that she's so accessible, and in revealing so much of herself, it gives so many other women permission to dream maybe things they didn't know were possible, which, we absolutely adore. So please enjoy this part 1 podcast with Coco.
So welcome to today's podcast, Recession Proofing Your Family Financially and Emotionally with Coco, the astro-economist. Welcome, Coco.
Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's so good to have you here, and just so pertinent, I think, at the moment with all of this fear, and I think for some families, overwhelm as we're seeing interest rates rise and the cost of living rise. And we just thought, let's get you here because we know that you have a really personal experience of, the emotional roller coaster that is the economy and investing and finances. And also you have a really great insight into the emotional governance that's required, which for our listeners and for us personally is really important, having family such a central focus. So I guess, can you tell us first of all why it's become such a personal, I guess, journey or focus for you to really empower women in finances? Because you talk a lot about the daughter economy. Can you share that?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know me, which is probably the majority of your listeners, I've been in business since I was 18, and I'm 36 now. And all those years ago, there was many women speaking openly. And I still find to this day, people aren't really speaking openly about all sides of finances. We hear about all of the the amazing things that people are achieving, but then people aren't really sharing, that through, 5 launches, they may have had 3 failed launches before they, got the 6 figures or whatever it is that we may be talking about. And so when I experienced my failures, I was a multimillionaire by the time I was 24. And then I lost everything at the age of 27. And then I was rebuilding, and then I lost it again at the age of 32. And now I'm also again rebuilding. And the biggest thing about that is I had no one to speak to about it. I felt like I was a failure. I felt that, like, what was I doing? Like, I was doing all the things and everyone else is doing the things, yet they're thriving and I'm not. And so for me, it became really important to have that conversation so that people felt that they were not a failure. And I thought, at first my ego really didn't like that I was opening up about it. But then I realized, and as you guys have mentioned, the emotional part of it was key. And it took me losing millions twice to realize that the primary reason why I lost it once and then a second time is because I hadn't worked on my emotional stuff.
Man, such a huge sentence.
Yeah. And so I'm like, no one is talking about this. Oh. And so I was just like, I have to. How can I not?
Hang on. What does that even mean for someone who just heard that? I realized I built it and I lost it twice because of where I was holding or sitting, or I can't even think what you said right now. My brain just like popped.
I can't even remember what I said.
No, but emotionally, like just string that out a little bit for us.
Yeah. So when I became a multimillionaire at the age of 24, there was no one around me that had reached those heights. And so I realized now, I didn't realize it at the time, but I realized now that I had subconsciously created that loss so that I could then relate to everyone around me, because I felt like no one could understand what I was going through, and I hadn't really created a network that would then allow me to go through that ceiling. And so then instead of going through the ceiling, I decided to subconsciously burn it all down, because I knew how to get back to that ceiling.
Yeah. So and it was safer in a way, like subconsciously, because you didn't have anybody to almost calibrate to that would make anything more than that safe or like known.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And then the second time around, I lost a lot of confidence because of the first time, and I didn't work on myself emotionally. I had started to after the first time, but I didn't, again, have the right mentors. I didn't have the right coaches around me. I didn't have the right network. And so it's almost like I had to prove to myself, again, subconsciously, that I was a failure. And so, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
We swear on this podcast? I'm not quite
sure.
We're yes, you can.
Just checking. I should have checked it before. But, I was like, you shit. Like, you don't know what you're doing. So prove it to yourself. And so I did. I proved it. And then after that, I was like, this is so exhausting. Like rebuilding, anyone who's in a startup or anyone who's considering, or you've got a side hustle with a full-time job, it is hard work. And I was like, how many times am I going to do this whole, like, build it up, burn it down, build it up. And I was exhausted. I'm like, I don't want to be doing this until I'm 70. Yeah. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So what happened then? So you're like, this is ridiculous, not doing this anymore.
Yeah. So in 2016, I was 30. And that's when I kind of started to see that things were about to fall. Like, it was a house of cards, and I could see that things were going to go down that path again. And I attended something called Path of Love. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but anyway, it changed my life. And if you look into it, essentially it's a 7-day retreat that I wouldn't say it's a silent retreat, but it's psychoanalysis, I guess. And there's 30 participants and 30 psychotherapists or counselors, that type of thing. And they essentially break you down to your core. Wow. And it took me 5 days. I would not let go. It took me 5 days because I was like, no, I'm like, I don't need fixing, even though my soul, like, that's the first time. It was actually 2016 to this month, July. And I saw it on Instagram that this girl had gone, and my soul, it was first time I listened to my intuition, and it was like, you have to do it. And usually I'd tell, in my mind would tell me my mind, I'm an Aquarian, right? So my mind rules my everything. And so since 2016, I've been on this journey of getting out of my head and listening to my intuition. And my intuition every time I look back now, and every time I was about to fail, my intuition was like, don't do the thing. And my ego took over and I did the thing. And that's what made everything fall apart. Mm-hmm. So now everything I do is intuitively led. And that's why I talk, I coined myself the astro-economist, because I truly believe that, well, and we know this, economy is part of the cycles. And so, everything is like the lunar eclipses and the full moons and all that kind of stuff, just like the tides of the ocean. Everything happens like that with the economy. And so being able to bring that to the forefront of people's minds and understanding how we as humans are also the same, that's when I uncovered like the secret source of myself, for lack of a better word. And so that's 2016. It took me 5 days to break down. And when I broke down, I don't really remember it because I went into this state of unknown, you could say. And when I got out of that state, the lady that was with me said that I had so much anger in my body that it took 5 men to hold me back. They had a punching bag and they had 5 men behind the punching bag because I had so much anger. And I'm not a big girl. I'm pretty small. Yeah. So, that started the journey for me. I've never actually shared that before. Yeah. And that started for me this whole journey. And ever since then, I've just been uncovering. And then, 2 years later, I had that my second breakdown, you could say. Mm. And now, like, I'm so grateful that I've gone through that, because I know exactly from a practical perspective how to work with wealth and money to really set things up so that doesn't happen again. But also emotionally, I can see what people are going through when they're about to, when things are going crazy in their life financially, and their whole being just wants to run away. And they're like, how is this happening to me? So it's just anyway, that was a bit of brain dump.
I love it. It's a good question. But I mean, I think what you did is you put us there, and like part of me was like, fuck, I couldn't do that. But that would be me. I would hold on. I would be like, fuck it. I'm like, because it's like, like you're fighting to the death, right? Yeah. Like your identities that are trying to hold on and justify like all the reasons.
All the reasons.
Oh, that's huge.
I just want to ask, so yes. When you say, I didn't know that I had to work on myself emotionally, what in the end could you, well, I don't even know if it's possible. Can you pinpoint and go, these are the things that I had to work on emotionally? And part B to that question, do you see those things in the women that you work with often?
Yeah. So part A, what were the things? I mean, now as myself today, I always say I'm a different version every day. As who I am today, I would say that the things I needed to work on were definitely my worth. So I've come from, my family background. My parents came from farmers. So, dairy farmers. So you work really hard. And then my parents were in hospitality. So it's always been in these industries where you have to just, the hard yucca kind of industries. Yeah. And then, or just realizing that I don't have to work and slog myself to make money, and not just a living, but actually make really good money. And the more I'm realizing this more and more, and it's so present for me now, having moved to Bali, that I've waited so long for the perfect time to do the things to live my life. And now that I have a 1-year-old, I'm not saying that you have to have children to have this. This is just my story and what's right for me. But it's not until I had her that I was like, oh my God, I've been waiting. Like, when I have this, then this is going to be this, and this is when I'm going to do the thing. And now I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to go to Bali. It was 2 years in the making because of COVID and all of that, but we're here. And I was just like, we've just got to do it. Yeah, things aren't perfect. We've got things happening back home, but we're just going to do it. We need this adventure. So I think just really understanding that you don't have to slog yourself. And the more in tune I am with myself, the more life goes my way. And I get it. If you're the listener right now and you're like, oh my gosh, she's talking like hippity goof, like this shit, I'm sick of this woo-woo stuff. I get it, because I've been there when I listen to podcasts, and I was like, you're not giving me practical stuff. I get what you're saying at a high level, but when you say tune into yourself, what does that actually mean? Yes. I get it. And
what does it mean? What does it mean?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's definitely been, it's like there's practically how I can describe it is like, there's this little person inside of me that knows everything. And for so many years, I've been like, you don't know anything. What do you know? I'm not going to listen to you, blah, 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 blah. And now, like even recently I moved here with my best friend, and, she started looking for a villa, and I was like, no, I'm not listening. I'm not looking for a villa. But then my ego was like, but what if she finds something and then you don't find anything, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, and the little person inside of me was like, no, she's good. Like, it's cool. Just leave it. And then literally looked for like one day and found this perfect villa that we're in. She'd been looking for 4 weeks and didn't find anything. Now I can't speak for her, but for me, I was like, if I had been looking before that day, it would have been from a fear perspective of like, where are we going to live? What are we going to do? Oh my God, we're going to be in a hotel for too long and we're going to spend too much money and it's not going to work out. And then what if all the good ones go? If she finds one and I don't find one, what's going to happen?
Yeah, the spiral, right?
Yeah, the spiral. And that goes with everything in life. Mm. And I'm just sharing that example because it's like just so recent for me.
Yeah, I love it. It's so poignant.
Yeah. And it's the same with my business and with my family, or, with my daughter. Like, people ask me questions about it. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just go with my little person, my gut, my intuition, whatever you want to call that thing. Mm. And the more that I allow my intuition to lead my life, and I can tell the last time I lost all my money, I said yes to a property deal, and my intuition was like, don't do it. Don't do it. It was like red flag. I was like, beep, 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 don't do it. Like, run away. And I was like, nah, like my ego was like, nah, this will be good. We'll make like $500,000. Just like, go for it. And literally I lost like 3 years of my life just with stress. I lost $500,000, funnily enough. And again, I looked back and I'm like, it was clear as day that I shouldn't have done that thing. And I did it. And so I just have these really big moments of, and now every time I go against my intuition, it's just even little things like, if I leave a water bottle on the table and I'm like, oh, my daughter's going to get that, my little person's like, oh, you better put that away. I'm like, oh no, she'll be fine. It'll happen. And it's just little signs to remind me that you didn't listen. Yeah. If you're not listening now, what are you not listening to?
Which is a great reminder, isn't it? Like, the little things, practice with the little things.
Exactly. And I think too, it's okay for us to talk about our mother's intuition when it comes to our children. But then I feel, and I have this from experience, I was in business with 2 gentlemen some years back. And that's when I started listening to my intuition. But they because I couldn't practically give them a black and white answer, they were like, you're just talking. Like, no, if you can't justify why, I'd be like, we shouldn't buy that property. We were doing property development. And I said, we shouldn't buy that block. It's not going to work. There's not enough in it. And they'd be like, well, why? And I'm like, I don't know. I just have this feeling.
Yeah, it's minimized.
Yeah. And they're like, well, no. And they bought it. And then, I left that company and they were 3 million down because, again, they didn't listen to my intuition. And I know, like, so I've just had so many moments of like, now I'm like, if I don't listen, it's suicide for me,
I love it so hard. So I just want to clarify for all of our listeners that what you're saying is building your intuition can lead to a more abundant, financially savvy life.
Yes. And I know you're listening right now going, oh, what does that mean? I get it. But yes, that's what I'm saying.
Well, also, I think that that's a relief for probably most of our audience, because this audience spends so long on building their intuition and returning back to home base and really doing that anti-culture stuff of coming back home to self and choosing self over the louder noise.
And the conditioning and the shoulds and all of that.
All of it.
Oh, that's so good.
So I just wonder, that's why I wanted to just hone in on it, to get clarity from someone who clearly has lived wisdom, which is so much better than just intellectual knowledge, right? Yeah. Just to go, this work that you are doing on yourself can also be applied to your money.
Mm. And I feel like the biggest work is trusting yourself. That's the first step. The second step is making sure that whoever you share your home with or whoever you're sharing your finances with also trusts that. Because when you're making a collective decision that comes from that place, let me give you an example. I was married when I was young and I'm now divorced, and my ex-husband and I are still friends. And recently I had a dream about his cousin. And I was like, I just texted him. I was like, is she pregnant? Like, I feel like your cousin's pregnant. Anyway, it ended up that she was pregnant and I didn't know. And he said, oh, I finally understand, like, you do have really good, because we were together when we were very young. You do have really good intuition. And I was like, man, it only took you 15 years, like far out, and now my partner now is like, okay, if that's what your intuition says and that's what we should do. And so I know that that's like the next step in a family unit, to really be like, okay, I have to trust myself. And then I have to show my partner, my other half, my husband, whatever your person is, that this is a thing and it will serve us in the right way. And that can be just as hard as trusting yourself.
I just love that. Let's get on to the good stuff, Bridgie. Well, that was amazing stuff, but let's get on to recession stuff.
This is a beautiful segue then into knowing what is intuition and what is emotion, because the things that quickly destroy wealth building and wealth holding is emotion, right? And right now there's a lot of emotion and fear in the collective, and certainly perpetuated by mainstream media around where we find ourselves in the economic cycle. So sometimes we can think, oh, my intuition's saying quick, don't do that, or it's reactive. Your intuition is very clearly shaped a lot by your knowledge base and your
that's true.
Insight, right? Which gives you, therefore, a capacity to lean back on intuition because it's not so held on, it's not so gripped by emotion. So can you share a little bit with us where we find ourselves in the economic cycle right now that tells you and says to you personally, we're heading for a recession?
Look, I didn't say this at the beginning, but I just want to say I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just, someone who loves this stuff, and I just share my experiences. From what I've studied of this economic cycle, we still have a few years. We still have 3 to 5 years. It's, based on the cycle, based on the data. Everything I'm saying is based on, it's called technical analysis. So what that means is that we review data for the last 100, 200 years. And through that, there's cycles, just like when we get the book about the tides, that's all based on cycles. This is exactly the same thing. And it's predicted based on that the recession will be around 2025, 2027. So
and this can be charted back longer.
200 years.
Yeah. And it's happening, and this is why you call yourself the astro-economist, because it's also mapped astrologically well, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. So there's always key dates that line up with I'm just trying to think of the what is the solstice. No, is the 21st of June and 20th. There's always like really big things that happen in the markets around the solstice on either side of the year. So there's definitely a lot of, what am I trying to say? There's a lot of synergy between the markets and astrology. There was something that you asked me that I feel like I didn't answer.
Well, she was kind of going down the path of cycles. So the fact that you can see cycles as a pattern across history and therefore an inevitability, does that give you a sense of emotional stability? Definitely.
So I think too, because now I'm 36 and I've been in it since I was 18, and if not earlier, because I always loved property, I now can see. So they say that one of the real estate cycles or the economic cycles last 18.6 years. So I've already kind of seen the half end of one, and now I've seen a full one, and I'm, hopefully I'm around I will be for the next 5 years. But a clear sign at the moment is that, lots of buildings being built. So I've been traveling the world the last few months, and it's true. You see cranes everywhere. In every city that you go to, there's cranes. That shows that we're coming towards the last part of the cycle. Then we're starting to see in the media. So when you're listening to the media, try to, firstly, I don't listen to the media. But if you choose to listen to the media, listen to what they're saying. So for example, ANZ just bought out Suncorp. Or, in America and the UK, they're starting to do no money down loans. So that's a sign of this time in the market. So you look at instead, like I still read mainstream media. I don't watch it. I read it. And you can see in all those articles, you know, the tallest building or the most green building is going to be finished by 2024, 2025.
So is this like almost like the economic version of the puffed upness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
it is. And so
getting into that puffed up, elated, like look at all
and
that.
then it's going to go boom. So I call it a bull market. So soon, like obviously we've had a rough few months, and that's normal. It's kind of like a bit of a dip, and then it's just going to go absolutely crazy. Everyone's going to get FOMO. You know, people like property prices can never get, like we've just had a massive boom the last 2 years. They can't get more than that, but people need homes to live in. So, you know, supply and demand, like homes are never going to go away. So homes are always going to go up. Plus, you know, governments get money from homes, land tax, all that kind of stuff. So homes are the best part. And also the biggest landowners want prices to go up: churches, governments, military. So they always want their land prices to go up. So yes, it's crazy now that prices are where they are, but they were crazy. We said that 10 years ago, and then we said it.
You know, whenever you, if you go back to whenever you bought property, now it looks cheap. You know, if it was 10 years ago. But then, I mean, I can remember buying the house I'm in and feeling like a lot of money then.
Exactly.
It was a lot of money then.
And people are like, oh, I should have. And it's like, well, you didn't, because back then you thought, like, don't worry about it. And that's one thing I want to say, like, don't get FOMO. If you're not in the market yet, it's okay. Don't worry. Like, there's still time for you. What you have to be mindful of is those little indicators. So when the market gets really heated, when lots of banks are, you know, if you look at the GFC, most of us would have lived through that. What happened in America? It's because they were getting 105% loans, 110% loans. Now, we haven't seen that. They've been really strict. But all of a sudden, they were like, here, have all this money for COVID. So the inevitable is now happening now, because we should have had a bit of a dip back then.
But and instead, all of the stimulus has meant that people have been, you know,
correct.
Cash and
Yeah, sorry, I'm a European, so I'm always using my hands, and I realize this is not a visual podcast. So we're getting lots of handouts from the government. Now we're seeing the dip, which we should have seen when Corona first hit and when the world shut down. But soon we're going to see, over the next 3 to 5 years, a huge bull market, which means that everything's going to go crazy, and people are going to get FOMO.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, so there's a bull market and a bear market. So a bull market is when you think of a bull, it goes crazy and it just goes for
and
gold.
Everything rallies, and it's just like, more expansion.
And people get FOMO, so then they're like, oh, I better get in, because if I don't, then my God, I'm going to miss out. So it drives the market to really
driven on excitement, isn't it? It's more an excited kind of energy.
Correct. And then a bear market is the other way, is when, and you can make money doing both, like trading, or, you know, obviously maybe not with property, but depending on what you do, you can make money in a bull or a bear market. So we're going to see a huge uptrend. If people thought prices were already high now, they're only going to get more. Now, obviously,
that includes not just property prices, but you're talking about cost of living prices as well. Like the inflationary pressure is only going to go up in a bull market, which is then why there's interest rates to try to counteract that.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a whole other conversation. I do feel that especially Australian focused, you know, the government probably should have increased rates earlier. But again, I feel like that's a different conversation.
And now they're trying to play catch up, right? So
Exactly. They are.
But that's the emotion that's then created in the consumer, or in the homeowner, or in, you know, the average family, who's then going, hang on a sec, like, what's happening now? This is too much too soon, which then pushes people into the emotion.
Right. So I just wanted to hone in on that, because I wonder if there will be some people who just got a little bit activated in their nervous systems going, what do you mean the cost of living is going up? Because that's the conversation that I'm hearing across the board, not from entrepreneurial people, I would say, but from employee people who perhaps live in that world. In fact, I was out for dinner with my in-laws last night at a ridiculously fancy restaurant. There were 6 of us who probably paid $1,000 for the meal, right? No problem for them. But neither of my in-laws will buy beans right now. I was like, they were like, what, are you doing well enough that you're buying beans? And I'm like, yes, I'm fucking buying beans. They're $20 a kilo.
What is this beans the equivalent of like lettuce? As I say,
yeah, because beans have gone up. So they were saying beans are what, normally $14 a kilo. Well, they were at the markets yesterday and they were up to $30 a kilo. So no beans at restaurants, no beans there was this whole bean conversation. And I was like, what is happening right now? And then I had a girlfriend who recently went back to work and she said, I went back to work to save money so we could have a holiday or whatever. She said, instead, I've gone back to work just to pay for shit because the cost of living has gone up. So I am thinking about those people who just heard the bull market is going to drive it up and they're already struggling. So I just wondered if we could like nuance that a little.
Definitely. And I find like this is a conversation that I have, and I'm just going to preface by saying I'm a bit of a hard ass when it comes to this conversation. I find, and it's true, people are struggling. And I get it. I had a property portfolio of 15 or 20 properties and the interest rates were at 8 to 9%. So, sorry, is that background noise?
It's really totally fine because we do kids and motherhood and all the things together. So we very
much 7
much
and 9-year-old that are having a fun time.
We welcome it.
So I understand when interest rates go up. I understand the pressure and I understand, everything that everyone's feeling. What we use, the really interesting dynamic at the moment is things, tools or suggestions that I would have for people maybe 5 to 10 years ago are really hard to apply right now. So I'm going to be really honest with people. In the past, it would have been like, get rid of your mortgage and go and rent. That way you don't have your maintenance expenses and the landlord can pay for all of that and you can put that back into your weekly budget. With the way that the rental market is these days, and this is in Australia. If you're somewhere else, I'm sure it's similar. It makes it hard to make suggestions like that. And when we're trying to feel into our intuition and we want to really feel light in our body to attract more things, how do we do that when we're already feeling really like contracted in everything that we're doing? My biggest suggestion is to, obviously I don't know anyone's personal situation, and I'm sure you guys have already looked into that, but there are certain things that we have to do to contract in our lifestyle so that our bodies feel lighter. So again, it's like, what decisions do you have or have you made in your household that come from an ego perspective? So like, as an really basic example, I've seen, look at the car market in the last 2 years because people couldn't go overseas on holidays. People have bought caravans. People have bought really flashy cars. Now, I know you love your flashy car, and I'm really sorry to say, but maybe you need to get rid of your flashy car. These are the kind of again, you're probably like, well, I've done that, Coralina. It's still really, really hard. I get it. Again, I don't know your personal situation, but it's really like, I remember being in certain circumstances where I was counting my money every day. Like if I bought a Freddo frog, and I'm not joking, like my budget was out. So I completely get it. But I feel like sometimes, so that our mind and our head and our hearts for our family, because when we're not right, everyone feels it, even when we're trying to hide it. Yeah. What can we do? It might be short-term pain for long-term gain. And I know that's not what we want to hear. I also see and think about and have made suggestions about what type of additional income stream that's not going to take you 3 years like a startup, or can you add to your household without having to go back to work? Or maybe you both are in full-time jobs and you're like, we don't have time. We have children. Like, we don't have time for another income stream. And I always say to people, like, you have a gift. Everyone is really good at something that we just think everyone else is really good at. What is that thing that you can outsource? Sorry, that other people want to outsource, that for you is a no-brainer. And it would take absolutely no effort. And because you know it like the back of your hand, then you could charge some money for that. And it might take you an extra hour out of your day that you might not be able to sit in front of the TV and do something. But if it brings in another couple of $100s a week, then why not?
Yeah.
So I really invite people to look at that kind of stuff, because I feel that, you know, even for me, it took me so long to embrace the things that I knew because I just assumed that everyone else knew those things. But then when I actually took stock of all the things that I know and I've done, you know, for anyone that's in their 30s, 40s, 50s listening, you have skill. You've done stuff in your life that for other people, they're like, wow,
how do you do that?
I didn't even know how to do that.
It's so true, isn't it?
And this is a mindset piece, though, that's so important to keep coming back to. Like, first, that humility that you were alluding to, where you might have to adjust your expenses or adjust your expectations of the lifestyle that you're living. But also the second point, focusing on where you can be of service somehow.
Yeah.
Which is an important question to continue to ask yourself if you find yourself in a bit of a self-worth spiral, which can also happen as a consequence of financial pressures, right? Because your self-worth can take a hit when you feel like you're struggling financially and there's some shame wrapped up in that. Like, I was just talking about this stuff with my mum, and she was saying that my grandfather, when they went through the Depression, the shame around the families who were struggling and who were losing their livelihoods, they moved house in the middle of the night so no one saw them.
Wow.
Right. So on that, for that piece, we've also got to consider that what might be happening for some people at the moment is some of those like long, deep family patterns from the Depression era that are being activated now, right? Like that kind of same, if you look at the epigenetic transfer of trauma and all of that, some of it's not even ours, right? It's ancient. And so that's also where our mindset and being gentle on those parts of ourselves that really do just want to collapse is really important.
And I want to speak to this because, and like I said, I'm 36. I lost everything 4 years ago. And just to give everyone some sort of like anchor into where I'm at, for the last 7 years, I've been living with my parents. So that I could get back on my feet. Yeah, like that's not sexy.
Yeah, you're not throwing that out there in all of your marketing, right? But there's a important piece to that, right? That made it possible for you.
Yeah, and it's also really important to but then it's created an opportunity for my parents to save money. It's given me an opportunity to be grounded and to be back with my family in a time of trauma. Then we've actually created this beautiful bond. Now I know for everyone it might be like, oh my God, I'm not living with my in-laws. But my partner's had to live with my parents. He hasn't had to, but he has. And yeah, it's created this beautiful bond. And if anything, we have community. We all have it's something that we never knew was possible. And now, now I'm living in Bali with my girlfriend and we decided to live in community again. We didn't have to, but it just made sense. And so sometimes we forget, we're so in our head that we forget that whatever's happening actually has a gift that we're not willing to see. And what could that gift give you? Why is this happening for you and not to you? And again, when you're in that spiral, I understand. But if you can allow things to not have a meaning and just to if you see it as an invitation for you to be creative, for you to think differently, and, don't think about having to keep up with the Joneses, because let me tell you, I share a property with my parents, but we live on 2 acres in the middle of Brisbane in a mansion, and it's not something we could have done individually. I mean, I could now, but not 4 or 5 years ago. So, we're 10 minutes from the CBD. We're there's no one that has that size land for us. So it's, again, I invite you, if you don't want to move, then do you have a downstairs that you can do up for very cheap that you can rent out? And then you might make an amazing friend out of it.
Yeah.
It's just really about inviting your creativity to see what else you can do, because beyond exchanging your time for money in terms of a job, there's only so much time that we have, and you don't want to be exhausted constantly exchanging that time for money. So how can you be creative with what you have?
Now, is that because we require a level of, I guess, emotional stability to be able to access that creativity that you're talking about and that you obviously employed. Was there things that you needed to do to be able to help yourself move through the emotional collapse that no doubt you would have gone through to be able to access that kind of creative thinking?
I mean, I'm going to be blunt and just say that's just like, that's it. That's my makeup. So I don't have to, I know for some people it's not, but I'm always thinking of creative ways. And that's how I've been since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I know that for me, like, I'm a bit of a rule breaker, so I don't care about the rules. So beyond, like, you know, even if I look at my sister, for example, you know, I'm like, why don't you do X, Y, Z? You know, she'd be like, oh yeah, but you know, we can't really do that. And I'm like, well, you can. No one, like, just because they say you can't doesn't mean you can't. So that's like kind of who I am at my core. But it is a good question. And I feel that for me, I didn't get here on my own. I've had mentors, I've had coaches, and I think that that's a really important piece of the puzzle. And again, you're probably like, well, I can't afford it. We can't even pay for fuel this week. How the hell am I going to do that? But I think, you know, there's plenty of opportunity to get people to assist you, again, in creative ways. How can you get a mentor without having to exchange money? I've done it before.
Me too. Bartering, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
let's exchange
School.
services.
Yeah.
What
The
value
village
can
still
you add?
exists.
Yeah. What value can you add to that mentor? If you've been following them on social media and you know they've been talking about that one thing and you know you can help them, you know, like, people are open, and you know what? You might get 3 no's, but the next one will be a yes. And that's the thing that's going to get you to that next place. And I feel like we all think that we get somewhere on our own, and we absolutely do not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Amen.
Yeah, you're like
See you, sister.
it's like busting that individualism myth, right?
Yeah.
That we get like cultured by.
And it's like that thing where families stick together. Whereas, as I said, like, we've created this community with my family, and it's like, I never knew it's what I needed, you know, and now I've got that, and I want to recreate it here in Bali with my best friend, and we're so
cool.
for it. Yeah. And again, it's not anything that I would have known to do had I not gone through that massive breakdown.
Yes. And also, I would say, even if you're not looking at exchanges with one-to-one mentors, how do you put yourself in a peer group?
Correct.
So, you know, community groups, paid membership groups, where you're still choosing to up level the people that you're being influenced by.
Yeah.
And I always say, you know, your network is your net worth. And I couldn't, like, you know, if you're in your family and you and your partner are both feeling really sorry for yourselves, which happens when you're going through what you're going through, get out of that little cocoon of whatever it is you're feeling and go and find other people. Because I can tell you that aside from my mentors and coaches, there's 2-3 key people that made me be able to be where I am today. And if it wasn't for them, who knows where I'd be.
I love that acknowledgement. Yeah, it's beautiful.
And that concludes part 1 of our Recession Proofing Your Family podcast with Coco, the astro-economist.
And if you want to get more from Coco and don't want to wait for part 2 next week, then hop onto her socials. She is I am Coco D at Instagram, and she does have a masterclass coming up that goes even deeper on recession proofing your life and business. So you can jump in on that, which is on Tuesday, the 21st of July. So find out more about that on her socials.
26th, I think. Next
Tuesday.
The
26th. Yeah, you're right. It's the 26th.
Yeah, that's cool. Next Tuesday. You guys can just go to our socials and look it up.
That's right. So if you want to connect with you, Jules, where do we go?
julietanner.love and Newbridge.
It's bridgetwood.life. And to find us, nourishingthemother.com.au and Nourishing the Mother on socials. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietanner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.